Hey there. Thank you for joining me, Stanley, on the Saturday. We've taken a long look at postmodernism and how it can help us better engage with truth. And I am sorry that I didn't get a video out last week. I was trying to figure out where to go next. Here soon, we will be looking at questions that are asked. And so if you have any questions, if you want to push back against postmodernism, by all means. If you have questions about how to apply this, if you have questions about what postmodernism means for religion, I, I'm a Christian pastor, and I've already gotten at least one of those questions. I'd be happy to answer any of those questions. So please feel free to comment them to the video on YouTube, comment them under the video as it gets posted on Facebook, message me on Facebook, and I will do my best to answer your questions. But this week, I realized I've been talking about how postmodernism looks at truth, and I've completely forgotten to address a very big thing. And it will kind of jump off the back of what we talked about last time. So last time we talked about how postmodernism looks at what are called meta-narratives, the overarching stories that combine all of truth, and what that means. And postmodernism is extremely suspicious of those. A lot of us have our own stories that shape how we see the world, but postmodernism is suspicious when someone claims to have the one story that all other people have to ascribe to. And I will say, on the one hand, as a Christian, I do think there is an overarching story, but I also think there's a distinction between what belongs in that story and what is particular to our story, and that distinction is extremely hard to make. So I do think that it's very helpful that postmodernism asks us to pump the brakes on that. But in talking about story, it dawned on me that there's another side to truth that isn't talked about, but that we need to look at for today, that I think is so helpful in figuring out how we interact with the world and truth statements that people make, and other claims. And the easiest way for me to get to these to this other aspect of truth is to talk about clichés. Now, a cliché is a statement that, because of overuse, is empty of meaning. So it would be like, it's like saying it's not over till it's over. Well, that statement has been thrown around so many times now, it kind of doesn't mean a lot, and there are instances where it doesn't actually carry much meaning. Saying it's not over till it's over. There are sports games that are over almost before they've begun, and the game gets played out and it's over well before it's over. The game's over. And there are times where we're given these statements to try to help us in a certain situation. So if we feel like something's a lost cause, someone's saying, oh, it's not over till it's over, keep persevering, or even some of the statements that people make when we're in pain. Hey, God has a plan. Saying something about, there's always every cloud has a silver lining. Saying these types of things, they sound so meaningless, and because of our use of them, they do lose so much of their meaning. But all of these statements had meaning at one point in time. And the reason they've lost their meaning is because they've become disconnected from the story that gave them meaning. So, talking about how it's not over till it's over. Well, there have been plenty of sports games that have proven this, that the game looked completely done and the other team's celebrating like, yeah, there's no way they can do anything. And then the next thing you know, the result changed. The team who was losing wins, the team who was winning lost. I mean, for sports fans, we don't have to look very far. The uh, recent Super Bowl between the Patriots and the Falcons, I think it was 28-7, something like that. And the Falcons were winning. The game looked so done. The Patriots looked bad. The Falcons were just destroying them. And then the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history happened, and the Patriots won and the Falcons lost. Because the game wasn't over until it was over. Or in British soccer, there's a team called Leicester City, and they were considered 5,000 to 1 odds to win the league a few years ago. I mean, they were one of the worst teams the previous year. They barely didn't finish in the bottom 3, which meant they barely remained in the league even. No one gave them a chance. They just changed managers after that season. No one gave them any hope. But they won the league. I think one person wagered money on them winning the league. The person actually got bought out by the sports bettors because they offered him more than what the person expected. So it wasn't over till it was over. These stories give meaning to these statements, and there are a lot of Christians I know who will make statements that sound like these empty cliches, but they have lived experiences that tell them that that statement is true. There are people who live through suffering, and they ask all the questions, and they wonder whether God even exists, and then all of a sudden something happens, and they say, "Oh man, even in the midst of suffering, God has a plan." And they utter that statement, and for most people it sounds so hollow, but for them, that statement reminds them of all the stories and all the experiences that led to it. We've talked here about how when engaging with truth, our experiences change the way that we look at truth. We talked about how truth claims form narratives that shape our view of things, that shape who we are and our understanding of truth. Well, the same comes true with cliches. What truths are for postmodernism, I think maybe what truth maybe should be looked at a bit more than it does, is that truth is actually the story of how the world exists. What is there in the world? Well, truth is the story of the world and how it exists. And so making a truth claim or making a cliche has behind it all of these stories and all of these experiences, and if you don't belong to those stories or those experiences, those truth claims sound so empty and pointless, and they're completely impossible to understand. But when you get into the story, all of those statements start to make sense. See, for a lot of us, we think of truth and it's like facts. It's like the sky is blue. I'm not getting into that debate. It's like the sun is bright. It's like 2 + 2 = 4. It's like it's like I am a living being. The grass, the tree, those are living beings. Those are plants. I'm an animal. I'm a mammal. I'm a human. These are facts. They are what they are. But that itself isn't quite enough to equal truth. To get to the truth, you have to tell the facts in a way that makes certain truth claims, that tells a story about how the world actually is. And you can use facts to tell stories that aren't true. People do it all the time. It's become really popular in the news and in politics to figure out the facts that you want to hear to tell the story that you would like to tell about a world that may or may not actually exist. But instead of doing that, we need to try to find facts to tell truths, to tell a truth about how the world truly is. this can take some work. It means that when you hear facts, when you hear truth claims, you don't just accept them, because you have to examine if that actually makes any sense to how the world really is. It also means that when you hear cliches, when you hear these kind of empty stories, you can't dismiss them. You have to look into stories that would give them meaning, and whether they actually play out in the world, and whether the stories that give them meanings really tell those cliches, or whether maybe it's trying to make another point. I guess what postmodernism reminds us of is that truth isn't easy. Modernism tried to make truth easy, tried to make it very simple, made everything very mechanical. Postmodernism says, wait a second, truth isn't quite that simple. It's not quite that easy. There's more to it. There's more to the story. And we really need to access this story. And as a Christian, I think that we are blessed with the ability to do so. Because as a Christian, I think that God has given us the story that unlocks these truths through the Bible, through the story of the Old and the New Testament, and that this story unlocks truth for us so that we can get access to it. But it's not a list of facts. A lot of times we do try to turn to the Bible for a list of facts or a list of rules, but that's not what's there. What's there is a story that gives us access to truth that we can then live out in our own stories. So hopefully postmodernism doesn't become its own cliche. That would be ironic and rather unfortunate, I think. Hopefully truth never becomes that cliche. I wonder if sometimes truth gets emptied of meaning so much that we just lose what it really should be. But hopefully this has once again kind of spurred you on to look at the world and the stories that we can find here, that we can gain truth from. And maybe the next time you hear something and you wonder if it's a cliche, maybe you'll be able to take a step back and ask yourself if there's a story being told that you need to look into a little bit more. Thank you again for joining me for another Saturday. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to comment those. I'm going to do a question video here the next couple videos, so please get those questions in. And until then, God bless you all. Have a great weekend.